So, without much further ado, thank you for listening to my little story, and please welcome Hannah Marley.
All right, my name is Hannah Marley, and I'm the Graduate Support Coordinator at the Office of Grant and Research Development. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, and I know that it's getting late in the day, so your focus is starting to wane a little bit, it's that you need to take down my email that's listed right up there and write down a little note that you're going to send me an email to set up a 1-hour meeting with me to find every funding opportunity in existence that applies to your graduate experience. Now, that may not seem important because you're a new graduate student. You probably already have funding from a faculty member. However, as a graduate student, you're at the perfect point in your career to learn how to apply for funding opportunities. Once you become a faculty member, universities often expect that you will know how to apply for funding. So why should you apply for funding at the graduate stage? Well, first of all is experience. As I just mentioned, as a faculty member, you will be expected to know how to apply for funding opportunities, and oftentimes universities do not have a training program to teach you how to do that. As a new graduate student, you're overwhelmed with responsibilities and you feel that you don't have time to apply to external funding sources when you're already receiving funding from your graduate program. However, as a new faculty member, you will be even more overwhelmed with responsibilities. So if you're able to master this task at the graduate phase, you're going to be ahead above your peers when you become a faculty member. The second reason is prestige. When you become a faculty member or a researcher, they'll be looking at your CV to determine whether or not you have experience applying to funding opportunities. This actually factors into the hiring process quite a bit nowadays. So if you already have experience and you have several funding opportunities listed on your CV, it's going to put you, once again, ahead above your peers. Next, you want to get your snowball started early. What do I mean by this? Well, once you receive one funding opportunity, it becomes even more likely that you will receive another one. The more funding opportunities that you have listed on your CV, the more likely it is that you will receive more in the future. So although you feel overwhelmed at this stage, as I mentioned, you'll feel more overwhelmed as a researcher, and if you get your snowball started now, it's going to be an easier process in the future. And also there's extra funding. Graduate students are often confused about whether or not they can receive funding if they're receiving funding from their department. And the answer to that question is, most of the time you can, especially if it's a private foundation. Sometimes you can even receive 2 funding sources at once. I know of one graduate student in the biological sciences came in as a new graduate student, applied to a bunch of funding opportunities, accepted 2 at the same time. He's now receiving $80,000 a year in stipends. And that's not just to cover his research, that's how much he's receiving for living expenses. He has some through government agencies and some through private foundations. There's nothing in particular that distinguishes him from the average graduate student. He's just developed this task. So what are the major sources of funding that you should be looking at? We have federal agencies. So depending upon your major, there is a federal agency that's going to provide most of the funding to that major. And that's generally where your faculty members are receiving funding. You should be aware of that as soon as possible and begin familiarizing yourself with the application process to that government agency. A lot of people don't realize that there is difference between the agencies and the process that you're going to go through to apply to them. If you master that at this level, you're going to be really well set when you become a faculty member. There's private foundations. So these vary, and what you're going to need to do to find out which private foundations you can apply to is basically just start the footwork now of going through foundationcenter.org, pivot.cos.com, and grants.gov. There's also business and industry. A lot of people don't consider the fact that a lot of industries are interested in the research that they're performing. However, there are very unique opportunities available through business and industry, both for internships and to have your graduate experience paid for. Now you may once again feel, okay, I have my graduate experience paid for through my faculty member. Well, it's kind of like a win-win if you receive funding from one of these external agencies. The funding, once you receive that funding, if you decide to accept it, you'd be giving funding back to your department that you've been receiving from them and accepting funding from that external source. And so that both helps your department and it helps you in the ways that I just mentioned on the previous slide. There's also professional associations. If you are not familiar with the professional associations for your field, you should familiarize yourself with them as soon as possible. And you need to join them right away. Once you join them, you're going to notice that they have a little tab on their website that says funding opportunities. If you click on that, there's generally going to be a couple of grants and awards that are available for graduate students. If you apply to them a couple of times, it's pretty likely that you're going to receive one. And once again, $1,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but if that's the first part of your snowball, and then the next part of your snowball is a dissertation improvement grant, you're doing pretty good. There's also state and local opportunities. As was previously mentioned, we have a couple of opportunities through the graduate school. We have a couple of scholarships. There's also generally endowment funds through your department. It's not always the case that your department is going to widely advertise the funds that are available. When I started my graduate experience, I started asking around my department, and originally no one knew of the funds that were available. After a month or so, I was directed to a person who was aware of quite a few funds in my department, and I was able to receive funding through them. So start asking now. What are the types of funding that you can receive through these different sources? We have fellowships. So a fellowship is basically an opportunity where they're going to pay you a stipend. So it may be $36,000 a year divided up into monthly payments. And they're just paying you to be a graduate researcher. They're not necessarily expecting to see that you're completing the project that you said that you were going to complete. They know that as a graduate student, oftentimes plans change. They want to just see that you're making progress. You'll also have your tuition covered, and you'll have your health insurance covered. However, fellowships is a broad term, and it's also used to describe all of these other types of opportunities that I'm about to go over. So when you see the word fellowship listed, you really have to click on the opportunity and just see what they're referring to. So grants is a sum of money that you're going to receive to either pay for research. Sometimes they'll pay for living expenses, but that's very rare, just like with awards. Generally, they're going to pay for research, travel, or equipment. And it's an opportunity that you're going to find from an external agency that you apply to receive here. Sometimes they offer them through your departments. Generally, that's endowment funds, though. You can also receive funding for research or publishing, oftentimes through the journals. You can also receive loans. We went over that before. There's dissertation and thesis research funding. Actually, the majority of the funding that's available for graduate students is to complete your dissertation. And there's many different types of this. There's some opportunities will just pay for you to sit there and write your dissertation for a year. If you're a woman sitting in this audience, I want you to write down the American Association of University Women. They have a $20,000 fellowship that's available to all women if you apply for it. And what they do is they just pay for your last year of your dissertation for you to sit there and write your dissertation. We also have a local chapter right here on campus, so you'll want to check them out. There's also internships that are available. There's many different ways of finding this. Oftentimes your department might know of it. They're also listed in pivot.cos.com, which is the external funding search engine that Washington State University pays for you to all have access to. I know that this system can be a little bit difficult to navigate at first. It's not as user-friendly as Google. And so once again, what you want to do is send me an email and ask to sit with me for an hour to learn how to find funding through this external search engine. Sometimes you can just find opportunities that will pay for an artistic pursuit, program development and curriculum, and travel. Sometimes these external foundations will pay for all of these. So why are we telling you about this at this phase in your career while you're already overwhelmed with everything that you're facing as a new graduate student? Basically because for most of these opportunities, it's going to take you 3 months to a year to put together an application for them. So if you go looking for dissertation funding, a year before you need that funding, it's going to be too late because it takes you a year to put together your application, and then it takes you 6 months to hear back from the agency as to whether or not you were granted. And then it's going to take a couple of weeks for them to actually disperse the funds to you. By then, you've probably already completed your dissertation research, and it's of a slightly lower quality because you didn't receive funding through that agency. So what a strategic graduate student does is they spend a couple of weeks right now just accumulating all of the funding sources that they can possibly find. And then they figure out how long it's going to take them to apply to each funding source. So for a dissertation funding opportunity, I actually called around to the different departments when I started my position, and I asked them, what is the shortest amount of time that your graduate students spent on their application? And by the way, I only asked those who won. I didn't ask anyone who submitted an application that did not win. The shortest amount of time that they told me was 1 year. Now, I've seen many graduate students try to put it together in 3 months, or tell other people that they can put it together in 3 months or even 1 month, which is ridiculous. But I haven't seen any of them win so far. So when you're looking for that dissertation funding, you want to find it right now and build it into your timeline so that you know 2.5 years into your graduate career, you're going to start putting together your proposal for your dissertation funding opportunity. And then a year after that, you'll put together the proposal for your dissertation writing opportunity. So within the first 3 years of graduate school, this has actually changed. So this is from a previous I put together the slide presentation a year ago, and this has changed. Now it's within the first year of graduate school. The Ford Foundation changed their requirements. So you have what are called new graduate student fellowships. These are what I mentioned previously, where they pay you a stipend, they pay for tuition, they pay for healthcare insurance, and they also offer you other opportunities once you get on the fellowship, where you can receive international travel funding and some local internship opportunities. So these are really good. Also, once you have these on your CV, you're considered a distinguished student. So it's really good to apply for these. They're also a little bit easier to win on average than most graduate students assume. You look at this and you assume, well, I'm not that accomplished. You probably are. 1 in 7 people who apply are granted. Some examples of these are the Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowship. They pay $24,000 a year and require that the school covers your tuition. The National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, which is what Eve is on, I believe that they up their stipend to $36,000 a year. They pay a $5,000 international travel opportunity. They also have local internship opportunities, and they pay for your health care and your tuition. What's that? And they pay your fees. So we also have the National Defense Science and Engineering Fellowship. We had a student win that 2 years ago, first one in quite a while. That one pays a little bit more than the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, and it's actually, you get paid more every single year that you're on it. And then we have the Hertz Fellowship. The Hertz is ridiculous in terms of the requirements for it, and I just want to see one graduate student go for this. It's basically like the Ranger training of the graduate fellowships. First of all, once you submit your application, if they like you, they'll call you up out of nowhere, and they will just have you do an interview right there, wherever you are. Doesn't matter. They're going to have you do an interview, and they ask you what your opinions are about the future of your field. They pepper questions in there, and then just randomly, in the middle of this interview, they drop in math, science, and physics questions in there. And you have to answer them on the spot. So you probably don't have a calculator. You just have to answer it. They then do another phone interview like that in the future if they like your responses to that interview. And then, if they really like you, they have you do that in front of 12 panel members, where they have upped the intensity of all of the questions. So, as I said, we haven't had a student that's won this yet, but I do know a couple of students where I think that if they had come in as a new graduate student and applied for it, they would have been able to do it. What is the preparation for these fellowships? Well, first of all, if you want to be competitive, you need to apply within your first 3 months of graduate school. The first deadline is November for most of these. So you need to get in there and start putting together your application today. If there's one of these that you're interested in, go onto their website, start exploring the opportunity, and start drafting your application. I also offer a workshop where we take you by the hand and lead you through the process of putting together your application, and then we put you with a panel of 4 people. Some just have a lot of grant writing experience, and others are previous winners. I try to put 1 or 2 previous winners on every single panel. All 4 of those people individually edit your essays that you put together for these opportunities and spend an hour talking to you about them. This is a free of charge workshop. It's available on the OGRD webpage. If you go to the OGRD webpage and you click on workshops, that's where you can sign up for it. So they have short essays. It's generally 6 pages or less, sometimes double spaced. The NSF is 5 pages total, single spaced. So it doesn't sound like it would take a long time to put one together. However, on average, it takes a student 8 drafts to put together a winning application. So you're going to spend probably about a week writing it, and then you're going to spend probably about 8 more weeks editing it. And at that point, you're going to have a competitive application. You're also going to need letters of reference. I'd just like to see an estimate. Can anyone tell me the percentage of applications that are rejected without review because the letters of reference did not arrive? It's 50%. Yeah, it is. You're right. It is actually 50%. So you need to tell your advisor right away that you're applying. Tell everyone that you are going to apply with that you need a letter of reference for them right away, and tell them when the deadline is. And hopefully they'll be getting you that letter way before the deadline. Throughout graduate school, you're going to be looking at travel funding, research funding grants, and awards and conferences. To obtain the awards and conferences funding, and most of the time the travel funding as well, that's through the major associations, so the professional associations that you should be looking into and joining right now. The graduate school has some funding through this, but generally it's not going to cover all of your expenses. And graduate students are often surprised that they are expected to cover their travel funding, and that is just the situation for most graduate students. However, if you're aware of what opportunities are out there a year before you need to go to the conference, your chance of having it covered is much greater. They also have research funding grants through the major associations and other opportunities. And once again, these take, okay. These take generally a minimum of 3 months to put it together an application for. And you need to be aware of them well in advance. So a little side note, when you're looking for funding opportunities, a lot of graduate students pass up an opportunity that they find because they see that the deadline has expired. Please be aware that most funding opportunities have cyclical deadlines, and they occur about the same month as the previous year's deadline. So if you find an opportunity with an expired deadline, you want to write it down and just plan on applying for it the next year. If there's no indication that they're going to have it again the next year, you want to contact the program officer or program director that's listed on the website and just shoot them an email and ask them, when will it be offered again? Is it going to be offered again next year? When I've done this, I've actually received feedback that yes, it's going to be offered again. They tell me about when it's going to be offered, and then oftentimes they just give me additional information that is not even available on their website, such as the Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowship. When I called their program director to see when it would be offered again, they told me that they were changing the emphasis requirements. It's been 3 years since they told me that, and they still haven't updated their website with the information that I received directly from the program director. So you definitely want to contact them. So throughout graduate school, you are also within the graduate school going to be looking at internships, research assistantships, and teaching assistantships. These are once again offered in your department. Oftentimes you're handed them by your advisor. So what do you do if you come here and you're not just handed them? Well, first of all, the graduate school listed out all of the places that you go looking for a general assistantship. That's what my position is a general assistantship. It's just a 20-hour-a-week job that you would work and receive a stipend for and a tuition waiver. And those are available in all sorts of departments. There's also research assistantships, which you generally receive through your department, and teaching assistantships. Now, with the teaching assistantship, a lot of people believe that their department is the only place that they can go for one. However, when I was a biology student, I received a teaching assistantship through the chemistry department because I had great scores in chemistry as an undergrad. So if you have a subject that you receive great scores in, I would check with that department and see if they have any teaching assistantships available for you. Okay. And for dissertation funding, I've covered most of this. You can receive it for just planning your dissertation, doing dissertation research, writing your dissertation, or any mix of those. It's really going to depend on the opportunity. Generally, for each of you, there's probably going to be at least 3 of these opportunities that are available that you're going to need to decide between applying to or applying to all of them. This is merely a faculty proposal, and in fact, those who apply, that I've seen, who apply for one of these major opportunities to a government agency and they don't receive funding, will oftentimes receive funding as a faculty member in their first attempt at receiving funding through that agency. So the National Institute of Health offers a dissertation fellowship, and it's very difficult to receive it. However, the process of putting that together prepares you to become a faculty member. Another one that students don't realize that they should be looking for is postdoctoral fellowships. There's a lot of external funding agencies that provide a certain sum of money, like let's say the USDA will provide you a postdoctoral fellowship. It's like the new graduate student fellowship. It gives you a certain stipend per year. They pay for a couple of other things, and you can take that to any university where you want to work as a postdoctoral researcher. So when I went to look for a fellow graduate student of mine to see what was available for the physics department, turned out that there were close to 50 postdoctoral opportunities available to him. So if you start looking for that right now and you're interested in applying to one of them at this phase, you're going to be very well prepared. Now it says a minimum of 3 months. I'm extending this so that you're actually prepared. Some of them are just an application sheet. You don't even have to write an essay for it. You're just going to fill out an application. Okay, so throughout your career, you can also apply to prestigious scholarships. And what this is you get to live in another country and teach or do research or learn a language. You can look at the Fulbright Scholarship, the Boren, the Pickering, the Rhodes, and the process of applying to these is going to make you a better faculty member and researcher. The person you want to contact is Sarah Ann Hones. She is the Director of Distinguished Scholarship. She is excellent. And so I'm going to give you a second to write down her contact information. I highly recommend contacting her right now. And if you've made it into graduate school, you are qualified for these opportunities, and I mean very well qualified. Okay, so what you want to do with all of this information is start putting together a timeline. So you know that it takes a year to put together your application for your dissertation scholarship. You know that it takes 3 months to put together your new graduate student fellowship application. So you're actually just going to put together a schedule based on your semesters and based on when you would like to receive the funding, working backwards. So what I've included in my presentation, but I'm not going to go over into great detail today, is basically an instructional of how to put together a funding timeline for yourself. So you're going to meet with me, hopefully all of you will meet with me. We'll find every funding opportunity in existence that you can apply to. We'll then put together a timeline, and I will start working with you one-on-one to make sure that you have the best chance of receiving funding during your graduate career. I'm actually going to go. And they are giving me the look. So I'm going to end this as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your time.